It is episode 2 of you can see it right there on the screen, the gold standard. So we workshopped the idea. No one said anything else, so I think we're going to go with the gold standard going forward. You cool with that?
I guess it's stuck. It's like a nickname. Someone else has to come up with it. So I guess
right.
This is what we're rolling.
Charlie Goldsmith, Joe Danneman. We do this every week here. We shoot it on Thursdays, and you can watch it anytime during the week. That's why we like to make the topics a little bit more big picture and not necessarily day to day in the changing landscape, whether it's the Reds, whether it's the Bengals, but it's two guys, two main topics, Reds and Bengals here in Cincinnati. And let's start the conversation this week, Charlie, with the Cincinnati Reds and looking big picture. So as we tape this, they are just finishing up in Kansas City and now going to start a weekend series in Chicago. Where do you place the Reds after what's been an up and down last week?
They're kind of stuck because we know things they do well. We know that they can go out and sweep a series against a very good Guardians team, take a series against a strong Orioles team. They've risen to several moments this year, and then they've crashed back down terribly in others. That's what makes the Royals series kind of tough to gauge because you took the series, but Wednesday with the way that the play in right field cost them, with Espinal's double play late in that game, it's just still so many moments where it feels like they're beating themselves, makes not coming out with the sweep feel more discouraging than it should be. They've had so many series that fit that description.
It's funny because so many people are saying, well, this is the team we can't figure out.
Yeah.
Well, I think we have figured them out. They're the team you can't figure out. That's what we figured out about this Reds. I would say a little bit more than a third into the season. I asked you last week, what was the ceiling for this team? You said 88 wins was the ceiling. Are you still at that number? You still think this team, after another week of data points, that this team still has a pulse when it comes to thinking that they might be able to make playoff baseball?
Yeah, since we last spoke, Elly De La Cruz has had his best week of the season, so that's very encouraging. The most important developments, even more important than Elly, because we had seen signs. We hadn't seen signs from Steer and from Stevenson, and they showed that with extra at-bats coming off injuries, they were not in a normal spot from a timing perspective and a reps perspective to start the season. They look like they have their feet under them. Friedel's playing great. The pitching staff has stayed solid. There's still enough there. I still project the Reds to be a 500 team, but 88, I'm sticking with that number as a ceiling.
Okay, it's funny you mentioned some of the names there, and we've talked so much about this team, and I think a lot of people watching this or listening to this understands that this team is built around its young core of stars, that they need the Ellys and the Steers and the Stevensons to produce for this team to be dangerous. The one name you didn't mention is the one guy we're going to talk about right now, the curious case of Matt McLain. What is going on with Matt McLain that it's almost June and we're still wondering what's up with this guy? Why is he not hitting like we expected him to? And is he going to turn the corner and have the kind of season that we expected him to have?
Matt McLain, I thought, was getting out of this. It was like during the stretch at Atlanta, the White Sox, he had a nice series, kind of that mid-early May segment. I was like, all right, McLain is starting to look more like the Matt McLain we know. What's happened since then, since the Pittsburgh series? He's then played his worst baseball of the season. He's looked even worse than he did in April when he still was struggling. There are mechanical swing things that he's working on. I saw him kind of simulating kind of the step you take to get into your swing. He was working closely, kind of hands-on with Mike Napoli about that. But it might be swing-related. It feels more a cat and mouse game, mental. It is a mental game, and he's kind of doing some of the same thing Will Benson did a bit last year, which was reacting late to the fastball and then overswinging. And that was a mistake that Benson kind of had to coax himself out of, or a flaw that he had to coax himself out of. McLain has to go through all that process now himself, and he's got to play better for the Reds.
It's interesting because he's never failed.
Never.
From what I've seen, I'm sure going back to grade school, he was the best player, high school, obviously, into college, the minor leagues, and his first year in the big leagues, he was top 5 in the Rookie of the Year voting, .290 average. In 89 games, he had 16 home runs and 50 RBI. So you're talking about a guy that's going to project to high 20s home runs, near 100 RBI. And this year, and I know this is a nerdy baseball stat, but I think in 2025, we all understand the WAR stat, wins above replacement. He's got a negative number. That is stunning to me, what's happening right now with Matt McLain. I've been asked about it a lot. I'm sure you have. My stock line is you just got to give the guy at bats and let him figure it out because he's just too talented. He's got a track record leading through the minor leagues and even that first year with the Reds. So what do you do with Matt McLain? Do you just keep running him out there and let him figure out, or does he need to go? You mentioned Will Benson. Will Benson benefited from going down to the minor leagues and figuring it out. Is that even an option for Matt McLain going forward, to give him some time, take some pressure off of him, and let him figure out whatever's going wrong?
Well, first with McLain, unlike Benson, and with McLain take out that one ball that he kind of missed on Wednesday, McLain is still playing fantastic defense, even some game-changing defense, and he's a plus base runner as well. And he's still impacting the game positively in other ways, even though the offensive profile has been terrible. What I'd be more interested in doing is, can you give him a couple days to work on stuff? That's a classic managerial move. Can you give him that chance to reset and really fine-tune some adjustments with some more aggressive pregame work and then let him take that into the game? I like that idea. The other alternative would be benching or optioning Matt McLain. I don't think the Reds are good enough to do that.
Yeah.
Santiago Espinal, they love, but that's been a big point of conversation. Santiago Espinal against right-handed pitching, there's really not even that big of a gulf or a gap between what Espinal's giving you against righties and what McLain's giving you against righties. Plus, McLain is a much better second base defender than Espinal. So in this theoretical situation, you'd be moving Espinal to second and Lux to third. That really hurts your defense. Espinal's not great against righties anyway. You're not really making the team that much better by taking McLain out, so I'd just let him play.
I think a lot of Reds fans, you mentioned him, so let's talk about Santiago Espinal here. A lot of Reds fans go back to what Terry Francona said, I believe to you, in a ninth inning scenario where he kept him in to hit when they had options to pinch hit. And he said that Espy, quote, if I don't want to misquote here, is one of our best hitters.
Yeah. Later, he also said the best situational hitter.
Okay. What's your take on what Terry Francona said? Understanding the audience is Reds fans who are kind of frustrated right now with that number 2 spot. So it's a two-part question. What would you do with the 2-hole hitter? Is Santiago Espinal the answer for that? And what's your take on Santiago Espinal, the player, as what the fans think and obviously what the Reds and Terry Francona thinks?
So first, something you hear is the Reds wanted to play, or Espinal could have had more playing time last year than he got. Heading into this year, there was the expectation that he was going to be in a bigger role. Plus, look at Terry Francona's life. He loves that type of player, and that's leading to an elevation of Espinal into a role that he's not as well suited for. Situational hitting, well, what are situations? Francona talks about the fake bunt he did and the way he puts the ball in play. Well, runner on first, 2 outs, tie game is also a situation. And you need someone who can drive the ball, especially someone who's getting your second most at-bats, someone who is behind TJ Friedl, who is on base as consistently as any leadoff hitter outside of Shohei Ohtani, and someone who is ahead of Elly De La Cruz, who presents his own headaches in his own right. The Royals especially, game planned that series to pick on Espinal with the way they use their bullpen, the way they use relievers. They waved a big flag saying, we're not scared of you. And Espinal is a very nice player who will continue to have a role on this team. But when other teams are showing that about your players, that shows that's probably not the best way to use them.
Why not Elly De La Cruz batting second?
That's what I would have done. Heading into the year, I would have had actually McLain, so old takes exposed. Then Elly. What I do now is I go Friedl, Steer, Elly. Francona, I think, is putting a lot of stock in, and I understand it, of breaking up the left-right at the top of the lineup, putting more stock than other managers do. A lot of the times you'll just see that the top hitters stacked up there. Steer, I'm really buying into the way he's pulling the ball again. Underrated speed. He's not clogging up the bases for De La Cruz. I'm buying what he's doing there. I want to keep Elly comfortable as he's getting hot. And I'd like to reward a guy in Steer who should be one of the Reds' best hitters and has the upside to be, unlike some of the other guys.
Count me in on that. I never even thought about moving Spencer up to second because for such a long time, I know he's only been here a handful of years, he's profiled as one of this team's best run producers, high RBI numbers, but putting him up there the way he's hitting now, as you mentioned it, coming out of it, starting to pull the ball, and there's not a great option for number 2 outside of Matt McLain, who's not hitting the ball right now. I do like that. I would like Friedl, Steer, Elly. I think that lines up with their probably 3 most dangerous hitters right now. Certainly Tyler Stevenson is showing signs of starting to get hot. We'll see how that goes forward. We'll come back to the Reds when we go to the Gold Rush a little bit later in the show. Let's transition now to the Bengals. And OTAs are happening. That's off-season practices, just a fancy way of saying that. Training camp's coming in 2 months, and we had our first lengthy Jamar Chase session inside the Bengals locker room. He did the big press conference when he got the new deal. He's been here for everything, which is different for Jamar Chase. What was your biggest takeaway? Jamar spoke for 18 minutes. From what he said, and he covered a lot of topics, everything from the Olympics to playing in the preseason. What was your biggest takeaway from Jamar Chase's session at his locker?
The biggest thing was undeniable. It was Chase admitting, I wasn't quite in the headspace I needed to be at the start of last season. Look at the reasons. Why did the Bengals really struggle to start last season? It was, people like Burrow coming off injury. It was people like Chase coming off the hold-in that he went through, not in a position to succeed. It was Higgins getting hurt at the 11th hour right before the start of the season. It wasn't, in my estimation, from a lack of preseason snaps. It was because of these bigger, more pressing areas that Jamar alluded to and that Jamar addressed head on. Those are the bigger issues that the Bengals used to deal with that they won't need to deal with anymore.
Okay, so the preseason, let's just take the conversation there. I've said all along that I believe Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, T. Higgins should play in the preseason. That, yes, I understand the risk reward.
Do you really want that?
No, I don't, but I think if this team needs to turn every rock it can to try to figure out a way to get off to a better start, you could argue and say, do you really think playing 5 to 10 snaps in every preseason game is going to make that much of a difference? I do think it will. I think if the Bengals do play their players in the preseason, even just a little bit, I think they'll be sharper come week 1. Because Jamar talked about this, and he said, look, the reason I don't want to go into the preseason and play is I can't get myself up mentally to play in those games. And so it won't make a difference. But I think once you lock a guy into a game like that, I think it just naturally takes over and guys get that feel again. So the risk reward, I get it. Look, if Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, or T. Higgins were to get injured in a preseason game, no one would ever forgive the Bengals. And maybe you do sacrifice a week or two of them not being sharp just to make sure that risk doesn't happen. But for a team who is hell-bent, Charlie, on getting off to a better start, why not overturn every rock you can? And this is one they haven't done yet.
The only people who have struggled in the early weeks of seasons recently and I've watched the film back to 2021, are the people who wouldn't have played in the preseason anyway. It was La'el Collins who had a back in 2022. It was Trent Brown who had tightness in 2024. It was Jonah Williams, who I believe was banged up coming off that knee surgery heading into 2023. It was Jamar.
You don't think Joe Burrow struggled?
It was Burrow who had the calf, who had the appendix,
right,
and who had the wrist that he was coming back from.
So each time it was him coming back from something very major.
Yes, and what Burrow doesn't need is a couple quick check down safe plays. What Burrow needs is a full healthy training camp and a chance to be the aggressive player that he is from the jump, which he hasn't had before. Again, look at the players who have struggled. It's the guys who either were hurt like Burrow or wouldn't have played in the preseason anyway. The defense, if you stack their games up 1-16, week 1 and week 2 were 2 of their best games last season. So I don't think it's a preseason problem. You will see them play a bit more in the preseason.
Yeah.
They'll play it safe. It won't really feel meaningful. I think the biggest change the Bengals are making is admitting they have a problem and hoping that tone shift is what carries over kind of the personality they have during the summer.
Okay, so let's pivot away from Jamar Chase because you took us to an important part of this conversation, and I think a lot of that has to go to the defense. The tone shift, admitting they have a problem, because when Al Golden got the job, one of the big talking points was getting off to a better start. Zach's talked about it, Al's talked about it, and it's all going towards what this defense can do starting now. Al said you have to win the offseason so that when you get into training camp, this defense, this team is ready to go. Are you comfortable with where the defense is right now? Because when I look out there, I don't see Trey. I don't see Shamar Stewart. Now, those things will probably change as we get to training camp. But are you comfortable right now with the defense? Understanding a fast start is where it's got to go, and it's got to be different. Under Al Golden, how do you feel about the defense right now?
I don't know what it is about this this system, this collection of players, but I've been fooled by this defense in training camp in each of the last 2 seasons. In 2023, Dax Hill had a fantastic training camp at safety in 2023. Then by the end of the year, he was their scapegoat. Last year, by the end of camp, specifically Cam Taylor-Britt, Von Bell, Jermaine Pratt, brought this dynamic energy, enthusiasm, and aggressive style to the defense that carried over none whatsoever. I'm at the point where this defense, with how many players there are who have everything to prove, with how many unsettled starters there are, I feel like I need to see it in the season. They're throwing a lot at these guys now to try to get them up to speed, but there's a lot of work they have to do because it's a group that hasn't succeeded yet.
Okay, so you did a deep dive into the identity of this defense on Charlie's Chalkboard. You can find it right now at fox19.com. On our sports page, you'll see Charlie's Chalkboard. Fire up this article. I read it. You wrote it. Two things that stood out were the new role, at least more of the identity of the defense, going through the linebackers, and then one of the emphases of Al Golden, and I wanted to pop this up here too so you can see it right there.
Oh, wow.
Charlie's Chalkboard, right there. I feel like I'm on a game show. You can find it right there on fox19.com on a sports page. Turnovers are important. Linebackers and turnovers. How important will those two be this coming year for the Bengals?
Well, again, this defense won't be great. Let's establish that. What this defense needs to do it's funny, I said to you on a show right after they signed Jamar and T, congratulations, you just advanced to the AFC divisional round. Now can you win? When they get there, this defense won't have the advantage against the Ravens, the Bills, or the Chiefs. Can they create 3 negative plays? Or 4 negative plays, or maybe 2 might do it as well.
Is a negative play a sack, a
Yes,
turnover?
A big sack, a fumble, a turnover, really setting you back. A drive-killing play is what I like to say. Something that you can overcome, which is a turnover, or say a 10-yard sack or a 5-yard loss on a run, something like that. They're trying to have this aggressive style because that is almost like the three-point shot, the great equalizer. You can have a lot of misses, but you can make up for it with enough makes. That's what they're trying to coach this defense to be. They're hoping that athleticism that they do have gives them enough ability to do that, and they're trying to start that process with how they install this defense from the ground floor.
The linebackers are going to be the engine, is what you wrote in your piece on Charlie's Chalkboard. Logan Wilson, we know everything about him. Jermaine Pratt, what the heck is going on with Jermaine Pratt? We still don't know what's going on with Jermaine Pratt, but we expect Jermaine Pratt will not be in Cincinnati this year. Demetrius Knight right now is lining up as one of the starters. If that's the engine, are you comfortable with that being the engine of this football team, Logan Wilson and a rookie?
Well, this is why they drafted a 25-year-old who some had a third-round grade on, because they are putting their chips on this being the guy. When you look at what Jamar Stewart's role might be, and he might have a nice season, but he'll probably start the year as 4th on the defensive end depth chart behind Hendrickson, hopefully, Murphy, and Osai. Knight's going to be the starter. Knight's going to be playing the most snaps. They're counting on Knight being the most impactful acquisition that this defense has made, and that's a lot to put on the guy. I talked to Logan Wilson about this. Logan, what a Bengals career he's had. We forget that they phased him in very, very gradually in 2020. He had a very, very limited third down role that expanded to then a full-time third down role. And they didn't even give him a shot in 2020, as bad as that team was, to be an every down type player. They wanted to phase him in, dip his toe in the water. And then in 21, he had to compete. He had to earn that starting every down linebacker spot in camp. Demetrius Knight, skip a year, and that's where you're at compared to Logan Wilson. I asked Wilson about that. He said, that would have been a lot to have thrown on my plate right away, and that's what they're doing to Demetrius. Right. They're impressed with his maturity, his ability to handle that. His speed can help him as well. He's doing extra meetings, Zooms, conversations with coaches and stuff like that to help with that process. They are doing a lot because they recognize how much he'll shape this defense. So
you spoke to Demetrius Knight as well for this article. A chance here for you to empty the notebook. Your takeaway from your conversation with Demetrius Knight?
He is invested and motivated and understands the task at hand with how much is being thrown on his plate. He said that his biggest emphasis and priority has been trying to use resources in the linebacker room like Logan Wilson, also like Shaka Hayward and Mumajong Meta. He's looking for help everywhere he can get it in that room, recognizing how much he has at hand. What he's not worried about right now is week 1. He's trying to get through an OTA practice against Joe Burrow. And you know what? He's done a nice job so far. That's where he's at. That's what the Bengals are putting in extra time in to help him get to. So far, so good, but a long way to go.
2 segments left on the show. We will transition now back to the Reds as we do the Gold Rush. The Gold Rush is rapid-fire questions to Charlie Goldsmith. And this week's Gold Rush topic is Reds superlatives. We played a third plus of the season. It's a pretty big sample size, right, to look at this team and kind of understand what they are. We have 4 categories. I'm going to give them to you, And you don't have to say one name and move on. You can say a name and give a reason why.
And these are all fresh. I've not.
Fresh.
I'm first instincts right here.
See, that's why we want to do it here. We want to put you on the spotlight, test your knowledge, and test your rapid-fire talent. Okay, Cincinnati Reds baseball. Best newcomer of 2025 for the Reds is who?
I've had this conversation with a few people. If the Reds knew this was who Austin Hayes was, they would have adjusted their offseason plans significantly to account for the fact that they would have signed Hayes in December and been much more aggressive doing so, as opposed to waiting to the end of January. He's got to stay healthy, but it feels very real, the offensive player he is.
Honorable mentions go to Jose Trevino, who's played way above expectation. Gavin Lux.
Gavin Lux has played great.
I think he's been really good.
Played fine, solid.
I would say he's played at or above expectation as well. Best newcomer, would Terry Francona get a vote?
I only judge Terry Francona by wins and losses.
Yeah.
That's how Francona wants it. That's what Francona is all invested in, and that's not quite there yet.
Okay, next category. Most disappointing player so far in 2025.
Matt McLain, just because this lineup was built, or really what this was the McLain and Ellie show. I said a lot before the season, we're going to be talking about McLain and Ellie like we do Burrow and Chase, and that's just not quite there yet.
Honorable mentions, Jamar Candelario.
Oh, of course. I forgot about Jamar. You know, he's been on the aisle for a while. But certainly, third base was a wide open spot that they hoped Marte was filling before he got hurt. But Jamar hasn't been the player they're paying him to be.
Would you still take McLain over Jamar in this category?
If it were Game 7 of the playoffs, I would have McLain in the lineup over Jamar.
Yeah.
So, Jamar.
The last honorable mention, Alexis Diaz.
Talk about off the map as well. Under-discussed story right now, Alexis Diaz does not look good in Louisville. It's been kind of even more concerning how he's looked in Louisville to me from what I've seen, even compared to how he looked in the big leagues.
I would like to have a longer conversation about him maybe on next week's episode. The guy was an all-star and now isn't even good enough to be on the big league roster.
And clock's kind of ticking because there's some transactional stuff. Like he'll be arbitration eligible again, and I believe your salary can't go down in arbitration. So are you about to guarantee Alexis Diaz a certain amount of money for 2026? You need to see more from him, and that starts with he needs to do better in AAA. Two more in the Gold Rush. Most surprising player of 2025. I think that has a positive connotation. Yeah. Most surprising. I am going to go with Jose Trevino, who you said, who is a guy that a contending Yankees team said wasn't in their plans at catcher. Even though they didn't have an established backup catcher on the roster, they kind of went with some in-house guys and said, thank you, have a nice year to Jose, and Jose has made a significant impact. You can tell how much pitchers love throwing to him, and especially in April, he did save this offense a few times.
I'll give you my honorable mentions. Emilio Pagan.
Yes.
In that role as closer has been decent, solid, certainly, and they were looking for that, and he's delivered. Up until maybe the fans started turning on him, Santiago Espinal. I still think he's a surprising guy.
He's having a fine year.
If you would have told me that it's almost June, he's hitting second, that's very surprising to me. And then Will Benson is surprising that he's given this team. He gave them a lift for 1 week, and if there's guys in your system that can help you for 1 week and carry an offense, he did that for a week for this team. One National League Player of the Week.
He's already exceeded expectations for what this season has been. Now,
he had a negative WAR last year. He's probably not going to have one this year.
He's been in a little bit of a slump. A very interesting roster, set of dynamics coming up as Fraley and as Christian Encarnacion Strand come back. What does that mean for Benson's role? As of now, I think Benson has done enough to keep a regular spot in the lineup against right-handed pitching.
And his slump's been interesting because he's hit a lot of balls hard. A lot of bad luck. Yeah,
yes.
Okay. Last one in the rapid-fire Gold Rush. Most valuable player of the Cincinnati Reds through 1/3 of the season in 2025 is who?
I wish I could come up with some smart answer.
I have one
but
that might surprise people, but I'll wait for you. Go ahead.
I still think Ellie has been their best player this season. Yeah. When you look at the pace that he's on production-wise, when you look at how his production in the cumulative stacks up against a lot of his teammates, he's having a very nice season defensively. We're not talking about the mistakes he's making. Ellie is the type of shortstop that 95% of the teams would love to have right smack in the middle of their order.
Honorable mention, certainly Hunter Green would be in that conversation. I think Andrew Abbott would be in the conversation, maybe get a vote. Here's my surprising, I would still go Ellie. There's no doubt I would go Ellie in the way he touches the game, both on the base paths, in the batter's box, and with the glove in his hand. But TJ Friedl. I could look up right now the Reds, and I feel like I'm stuck on this stat today, wins above replacement, but I think TJ Friedl is going to be very near the top. I think Ellie would probably be at the top considering his big game in Kansas City, but TJ Friedl, what he's doing right now for this team is invaluable. I would say outside of Ellie, he's the one bat that they cannot afford to lose in their lineup if they want to keep treading water and keep this thing going. We know TJ's missed a lot of time in recent years. The way he plays the game is going to lead to him missing some time. But the way he's delivered so far this year, to me, I think he's in the conversation for Reds MVP.
I think we saw last year how valuable TJ Friedl, or a full version of Friedl, which he wasn't last year because he was consistently banged up. And then in 23, he led the Reds in wins above replacement. I don't feel like everybody did a good enough job of stressing at the time just how good Friedl. He was performing like a top 50, top 60 player in baseball at the time. Add on top of that the fact that Friedl just has a consistent way that he plays the game that's almost infectious. He's become one of the true lead-by-example types on this year's team. There's a lot that TJ Friedl does, and they're certainly thrilled to have him.
I've always wanted this to happen, and it just finally happened. A Reds transaction while Charlie was live on the air. To see his reaction, I know he's going to be itching to get his Excel spreadsheet out. Here you go. There's the transaction.
Optioned Luis May to AAA. Yeah. Very interesting that the Reds had a decision to make coming off the Pittsburgh series. Who is it going to be between May and Richardson? May had been pitching very consistently in high leverage innings up until that point. I think for May, the biggest thing has been you don't pitch a lot of back-to-backs in the minor leagues. You don't pitch a lot of 3 out of 4. I think that's led to a 80% version of, taxed is the word we all use.
Sure.
Luis May. I don't think Richardson's been down enough days to be optioned back up. If that has been, he'd be an obvious move. Louisville's bullpen, by the way, is stacked. Like, Louisville's bullpen right now, even with Alexis Diaz, is better than a lot of Reds' bullpens have been over the last 2 years. So I'll be curious to see who gets called up.
Gold Rush over. Now the Gold Nugget. And this is where I dive deep into Charlie's experiences or his notebook. And the Reds just finished a series against Kansas City, and their first time going against Jonathan India since the trade that brought Brady Singer to Cincinnati. You did an entire podcast, a deep dive with former Fox 19, now sports director Brian Giesenslaw, now the pre- and post-game host of Reds Live, a deep dive on the Singer for India trade, okay? Give me your best nugget on the Jonathan India trade, because fan favorite here in Cincinnati. Reds fans loved him. What was your best nugget from that deep dive into Singer and India?
Well, it was the timing. It was in 2023. The Reds wanted, the Reds tried, the Reds were pursuing Brady Singer in a trade. The Royals asked for too much prospect capital. In return, no deal. In 2024, the Royals called the Reds asking about Jonathan India. The Reds, according to the Royals GM, were very serious. They weren't going to move him. Nick Kroll confirmed that Jonathan India was not in their plans to trade in the middle of last season. Singer would not have been on the table last July. Season ends. McLean's coming back. They want to give Espinal a bigger role. The Reds finally saw India as tradable. Singer was tradable from Kansas City's perspective, and after 2 years, the deal finally happened between those two sides.
Quickly, as we wrap up the show, do you think Jonathan seeing his name in all the trade rumors affected his on-field playing?
In 23, it did.
Yeah.
He got over it, and he, I think, was also ready to kind of move in a different direction. When he saw how his role was changing, this year he would have been utility, first base, left field, not quite the Jacob Hurtubise role, but that's the spot he would have, the Tyler Callahan role when Callahan was up in the big leagues for a few days. So I think both sides recognized that there was just more valuable, both pieces, Singer and India, were more valuable on another side.
That was episode 2 of the Gold Standard. Charlie Goldsmith, Joe Danneman. You can watch this show on Fox 19 Now's Roku, Amazon Fire, and Apple TV apps. Depending on when you listen to this, Charlie's going to be at Wrigley Field this weekend covering the Reds and another huge series against the Chicago Cubs. Make sure you find Charlie's chalkboard right on our fox19.com/sports is the easiest way to find that. He's got his own tab. He's doing big things, and
we showed it earlier.
I did, and I'll show it again right here. There it is, Charlie's chalkboard right there on our website. I'm like Vanna White. There we go. Charlie, episode 2 in the books. Well done. Have a safe trip to Wrigley Field. We'll do it again next week.